Alrighty, well, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome. My name is Michael Irwin. I am the Senior Manager of Business Development here at Widelity. I'll be kind of emceeing this webinar, but I'd like to introduce our two presenters, starting with Trey Hall, the Senior Consultant of Business Development at Ciena. Trey, if you'd like to take just a couple minutes to give a brief intro to yourself and your background.
Sure, Michael, thank you, and welcome everyone. My name's Trey Hall, and I work in business development here at Ciena, and my job is really focused around the broadband opportunity space that Ciena sees in the market now. We've been a supplier of optical transport technology for a number of years, dominant in that space that broadband people refer to as middle mile. And now as the company has made some acquisitions and is developing further to the edge of the network, we stand ready with an XGS-PON solution that serves in the last mile space of the network. And so with all the build and all of the projects that are the nation's undergoing right now, it's a great time to be entering that space, and we're excited about it here at Ciena.
Awesome. Well, again, Trey, we're very excited to have you here. Now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague. This is Caitlyn Withington. She's a consultant on our business development team. And Caitlyn, would you like to take a couple moments to introduce yourself?
Hi, so my name is Caitlyn. I have been working in business development at Widelity. Widelity is a telecommunications consulting company, and where we come into the broadband space is that we handle grant applications. We are compliance experts, so we can help you with essentially all of the paperwork and red tape that is between broadband providers and funding. So that's kind of what we're bringing to the table. And I work with the research and development team, and we've been really studying BEAD closely and following it for the past couple of years. So yeah.
Great. Well, thank you, Caitlyn. And just before we get into the meat of the presentation, just some quick housekeeping. If you have any questions at all throughout the presentation, please feel free to utilize the question and answer feature in Zoom. I will, at the end of our presentation, I will go over any questions, read them out to our presenters, and field them. And you could put those questions in there, either or even in the chat as they come to you. And we will go ahead and get started now. You can go ahead and take it away, Caitlyn.
Okay, well, as I said, we're a telecommunications consultant company. So Widelity has provided compliance assistance for several years now, but we have been in the telecommunications space for almost 20 years. We were involved in the planning and deployment of the 5G network, and specifically in compliance, we helped with the broadband or the broadcast repack, which was this huge operation that involved reorganizing how the spectrum was partitioned out. And so we assisted essentially TV stations in making that transition and getting the funding that they were promised for that. And so we have a lot of experience in the both the acquisition and the reimbursement side of things. We've also worked on the supply chain or SCRP program. And we have also worked on middle mile grants and a little bit in the innovation fund. Our services include grant eligibility consulting, applications, compliance audits, RFI management. RFIs are requests for information. So when you submit a grant, you usually have to follow up with some additional information. So we'll help you manage that. And also the post-award reporting and reimbursement. So yeah, that's what Widelity does.
Great, Caitlyn. I'll just add, you know, when Ciena looks at all of our network operating clients and partners in this ecosystem, and we think about who's going to be building broadband networks in the years to come, There aren't many of those organizations in the most rural parts of the country that are just extremely well staffed and all the expertise that Widelity brings to the table. The paperwork and just the process knowledge is something that's very naturally consolidated in the marketplace. And Ciena is excited that you guys are able to provide that expertise on a one-to-many level, because that's exactly what the market needs right now. There's a whole bunch of folks that certainly can't replicate the experience nor the perspective that you guys have. So just want to say that on behalf of Widelity, it's great to be working with you guys, and we know how valuable your part in that broadband journey is to the overall success of a project. Things don't get started without your front end work. We're typically dealing with projects after you've had the opportunity to touch them in that way. So
yeah, and Widelity really is your advocate to navigate this world that can be very complex, and it can be a very heavy burden, especially on smaller companies. And so we really are able to slot in there, and we bring our expertise, we bring all of this time and effort that we have put into understanding these programs and understanding how how the workflow of the grant system works, and how to make that as painless as possible. So we're very happy to bring that to this big machine of how broadband gets out to people.
Yep, absolutely. So if we flip the page then and we talk a little bit about Ciena, I'll assume for a moment maybe you haven't heard much about Ciena, may not be real familiar with the brand. I would start just with the context of, imagine Googling the top 10 telecom equipment technology providers in the industry, and you're going to find Ciena in that list of top 10 brands, with the likes of, Cisco and Nokia and brands like that provide telecom technology. Ciena is one of those leading brands inside that list and inside our industry. And Ciena has been specialized in optical transport for much of its history. So in the list of all those vendors and things and solutions and application spaces that different brands fulfill, Ciena is a specialist in those big pipes that again we refer to as middle mile in the broadband market, but generally optical transport across any length, whether it's subsea transmission or aggregation, pipes and networks, all the way down to what is now extended into the access side of the network. Ciena is an optical transport specialist. So as we make electronics and technology for the industry, we touch on an awful lot of different kinds of network operators. There's utilities that run OT networks that use optical transport, and there's municipalities and counties and governments that have agencies that run networks that use our technology. But our largest market are the service providers and the people that have been providing residential internet broadband all along. And I'd tell you the thing that, if you know Ciena, you would know that we build the big backbone pipes and the big parts of the transmission of those networks. And if you haven't heard recently, the new news about Ciena is that we've taken that pedigree in transport and we've extended it all the way out to the edge of the residential edge of that service provider network. We now have an XGS-PON solution. It's been onshored into the U.S. manufacturing for BABA compliance to prepare for BEAD projects and compliance there. And we're really excited because that last mile typically gets built off of the middle mile that we're already very much a part of. So it's a natural extension of our business at a time when the industry needs all the capacity and solution and capability that it can muster as we try and leave nobody behind here over this next build cycle.
So what we really want to focus on today is talking about the rural markets. So especially I'm sure all of you here know about BEAD, which is, this billions of dollars coming into the funding space for broadband. It's all coming out really fast. And one of the key areas that BEAD will be financing is the rural market. And the rural market has been somewhat underserviced because it is difficult to have a sustainable network out there. So there's a lot of opportunity, but there's also a lot of challenges. There is room for growth. There is room to expand networks. There are places that are untapped potential. But you have to be very smart about how you go into it because the population is lower. Your take rate will not be as high. And you really have to be attentive to how to best utilize the resources that are there in order to get a foothold there and maintain your network in a sustainable way. Because there are a lot of benefits to this funding, but it's just not going to take you 100% of the way. You have to also think about how the build out is going to sustain itself.
Yep. I would add, if you look at the internet market as a utility, it is not a fully regulated rate-based utility. There's a free market component to this industry, and the sheer capital investment per home, per revenue unit inside of really rural networks is never going to be financially favorable, right? It's very difficult to make ends meet when you're servicing so few with a lot of capital intensity. And there is, in particular, on the front end of the outside plant construction side of these projects, a huge cost of barrier to entry, and that is owning the glass in the ground, right? There's the fiber deployment itself is a tremendous expense. So the market as a free market has been moving towards edging out into the cracks and crevices of rural parts of the serviceable addressable market in the US for a decade now, ever since the universal service fee started being restructured in 2010, I suppose. Back with CAF, ACAM, BTOP, and we all remember the experimentation programs we went through over those years, learning how to edge out further. But the paradigm shift that we've got coming is really exciting, Caitlyn, because suddenly, instead of looking at, well, what's the next exchange or the next neighborhood that I'm going to build out into, we're aiming at bridging that gap entirely, so that the next edge out expansion opportunity for a carrier 5 years from now, if we're successful, won't look like, where do I put novel fiber optic cable that doesn't exist? It's going to be, where do I go compete against someone that already has infrastructure in place? Because we're planning on building an awful lot of fiber and network connectivity over the next 5 years. So that paradigm's going to shift. So now's the time, I guess, is the way to say it.
Yes. And now is the time for two reasons. And one is that there is a lot of federal funding that is available right now, that is going out right now. And a lot of states are actually stepping up and bringing state level funding to support that. So the money to create these build outs and to offset some of that initial build out cost is available now. But the flip side of that coin is that the goal of programs like BEAD and Capital Projects Fund is they want complete coverage. They want to get to everyone. And so these markets are going to be essentially not gone, but they will be built out too. So the way that your opportunity to get into these markets is going to be very different, and the opportunity will be a lot smaller. Right now, these places are underbuilt. They don't have access, but 5 years from now, assuming BEAD goes to plan, everything will have, at the very least, fiber out to it. There will be the opportunity to connect. So if you want to get in on the market in a meaningful way, now is a really great time. And if we want to go,
one of the last great times, right? Because at the end of the day, you're right. There's urgency associated with just the competitive build out plans for everybody around one another from a networking operating perspective. But at the same time, the challenge is not diminished entirely diminished by the subsidy. And the subsidy is here to help and enable to make this happen. And the mission is, we've got enough to get us there. But at the end of the day, we're going to take stock in 5 years and see exactly how far we've come. It may be that we've done 95% of the job, but I think the point to be had there is a network that's built under these conditions is still going to suffer the same financial strain that any network would have been built without the subsidy in the long run. These locations are going to need to thrive economically in order to feed the payback and the return on the network. But moreover, what I see that's very encouraging is there's cross-pollination of network assets, right? And you've got multiple different types of markets starting to come into play. And I think the use cases and the value of those networking assets across those markets are eventually going to help bolster the sustainability and the profitability of some of those operations. So it's a really interesting time. It's dynamic, Caitlyn, and it's unprecedented for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great transition to our next slide. I want to talk a little bit more specifically about what federal subsidies offer and what they don't offer. So when we're talking about federal subsidies, you generally have two categories. One is the deployment category, where you are getting funding to get the fiber in the ground, to get the middle mile and the last mile out there. So it's construction based, it's laying the cable, it's access. And that is just going to be getting that out there. And then and those are going to be very short term. So those will get you on the ground, but they are not going to have a significant impact on your overhead going forward. And then you have subsidies like ACP, which are more of a long-term investment that is subsidizing, low-income subscriptions. You also have workforce development, digital literacy rate, that sort of thing that provides support for the actual consumers. And that can also offset some of the costs of being in these rural areas, but we don't have as much of a guarantee about those ongoing supports. So the really great thing about the federal subsidies in the deployment space is that it can offset the cost of getting that infrastructure in there. And because BEAD is very future-proof forward, it really wants that fiber in there. It really wants you to be able to scale up. You're really going to be able to put that in the ground and then have it. And then you'll, have that for the next 5, 10, 15 years without having to make a significant update. And you will be able to scale up to meet demand. So you will be able to get that equipment on the ground, get it out there. But then once you get it out there, then the sustainability is up to you. And the tricky part is that you have to show that you are able to create that sustainability. That's something that you're going to see in all of these applications, where they're going to have a section where they ask you, what your take rate is going to be. They're going to ask you what your business model will look like. And so the tricky part is taking this really great opportunity where you can get so much build out funded and be able to turn that into something that lasts for hopefully decades.
Yeah, Caitlyn, we talk with a lot of entrants into this broadband space right now, because obviously with this much funding, this much capital intensity, there are folks that are coming into the market that are new, and entire segments of types of players. In fact, you could name the rural electric co-ops from the utility space started coming in during the RDOF round. When the FCC restructured rules and opened them up. We've had municipal broadband networks for years and years, but really a small segment of an overall big market that looks to potentially grow significantly during the BEAD round. Yeah, all of these different types of network operators follow in the footsteps of people that have been solving these challenges for decades. And so I think the lesson to be learned across all of these different use cases and markets and broadband operator types that are coming around today is look at the last decade, look at the last 2 decades at exactly how these networks survived financially, and you'll begin to see the model for monetization of that asset. And again, the cross-pollination of use cases and markets involved in these assets only adds to that list, and I think complements that effort further. So whether it's a utility that's able to use it for grid modernization and OT networking, or a municipality that may be able to shed leased circuits in favor of private owned and operated network. There's a lot of 3P out there that combines all of these people together. But in all of those cases, you've got scenarios where they've found ways to make money through this networking asset and monetize that investment beyond the residential broadband alone. And I think that's an important recipe for the sustainability for all these networks.
Right. And there's this really great synergy between planning for your own benefit and for the benefit of your customers, and creating a narrative that will make you a compelling applicant for these federal funds. So you really, when you're creating your application, you really have to create this story about how you're accomplishing the government's goals. So the government's goals is to get to everyone and make sure that they have broadband service. And they don't want this to just be a 5-year thing. They want this to go on and continue to create this connectivity. And so not only is it a very sound business practice to know what your game plan is for making it sustainable, but that will significantly increase your chances of obtaining the grant in the first place and getting everything going.
And in all this unprecedented funding, as well as just market participation from entrants and abound, I'd say one of the most important things you can do right now is be well networked with the rest of the ecosystem around you, right? And everybody else in the marketplace. There's a lot of cross-pollination and a lot of cross-learning to be done, as new players enter the space, and as we seek additional use cases for these network assets. I think it's really important that we all leverage one another, and that's really a theme that kind of pervades the entire market, the entire industry right now, in terms of this challenge, where it's going to take all of us together to make this happen, and all the resources that we have combined might achieve this goal in 5 years, and we've got a big stretch in front of us. So we should all be thinking in an inspired yet really aspirational way about transforming our industry and building more partnerships together in order to make it happen, because we can't do it alone.
Right, absolutely. This is going to take the big companies, the small companies. There are areas that these nationwide networks just are either not that interested in, or maybe they don't know the community as well. There may be requirements for collaboration with municipalities that they're not necessarily equipped for. So there's going to be space for everyone in this network. It just has to be you just have to kind of find where that spot is. And I really want to emphasize that now is the time. So you can see this little chart that we've made where we took all of the federal funding for broadband, and you can see that we are at an all-time high. This is unheard of amounts of money. So we have $42.5 billion just in BEAD funding. And this is not including state funding. This is not including things like this is including things like the Capital Projects Fund. But you can see that BEAD has really hyped up the amount of money that is just out there being distributed to the states. And the end goal of this program is to serve everyone. So they really are going to build out everywhere. and it is not going to be an opportunity that's going to be around for multiple years. This is going to be over by beginning of 2025 at the latest. So all of the application windows are going to be in 2024. All of the money will be designated to specific awardees by mid to late 2024. So this is not something that you can wait on. This is something that is happening right now. And as we said earlier, once these markets are spoken for, then as far as getting federal funding, you're not really going to get great opportunities for overbuilding. They really want to not duplicate funds. They really want to spread it as far as they can. And so these places are going to be covered. And then over the next 5 years, the build out will happen. So you really want to start looking at your projects and your expansion projects and reinforcing your current networks right now. And if you want the federal funding, you need to look at it right now. So this is not something to wait on in any way. You really got to get a hold of it and seize the moment. And as Trey was saying, the key to that is making great partnerships. So you really need to collaborate with your manufacturers. You can get help from people like Widelity, where we can help you get through all of this paperwork and red tape that they've put up in order to, of course, make sure taxpayer money is going where it's supposed to be going. But that can be a very complicated process. So we can help you get through that. And you can there are people out there who really want to help you. The state governments are really stepping up to provide educational materials. They are doing webinars, they're doing engagement. So there are ways to get plugged in and really get involved in this. And if you haven't already, you really need to get on it right now, because this is not going to be a slow process in any way. And if you have not already started mapping out your project and getting your engineers on that, then you need to do it now.
Don't miss it. The chart says it all, and it's funny that you start the timeline back in 2010. I mentioned it earlier, but that's when broadband experimentation started. That was the beginning of the restructuring of the universal service fee, when we went from subsidizing POTS, Plano telephone service, into broadband experimentation. And we spoon-fed a $100 billion problem, a couple billion a year. And it looks like zero along all those years, but having lived in that market, I can tell you all those years it wasn't nothing, and it felt like an entire stream at the time. But in contrast to what we're in the midst of now, it seems like a penance. So really significant, as you said.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
So we wanted to really give you a general look at how BEAD is being distributed. To give you an idea, we're taking, 42.5 billion, and that gets split out to all of the states. There is also funding going to the territories. They're not on here, but they did get a not insignificant amount of funding. So if you're interested in the territories, please reach out to us. But as you can see on the left diagram, we can see that Texas got they got the big bucks. They have 3 billion in funding, and that is needs-based. So essentially, when they did an analysis of the BSLs and which ones were unserved and underserved, they found a lot of need in Texas, and so they ended up with a lot of funding. Where the lightest blues on the map are areas that didn't need as much funding, so they ended up with 100 million, which was the minimum. So you can see the second darkest shade of blue are all 1 billion plus. So there is a lot of money out there, and it's really dependent on the state how exactly it gets used, but they must ensure that unserved and underserved locations are reached so that broadband deployment goes out. and that is required before they can put it towards any other use. So the other use would be digital equity, workforce development, that sort of thing. But before they can do that, they have to make sure that the first priority of BEAD, which is the deployment, gets done. And this is primarily going to be going into last mile, although there is a little bit of middle mile that may get built out as part of reaching that last mile.
Yeah, I gotta just emphasize at this look here at the state level, just exactly how important the local rules and regulations and laws are relative to this project. Yeah, you've got you have state laws that govern some of the participation capabilities of certain markets in this broadband project. You've also got state broadband offices in each state writing their own plans about their own process that's locally tailored to their own local needs. And so you get some variety, amongst each of these locations. And if you're not talking with your state broadband office and don't have a good dialogue there as a network operator or a network asset holder that could be partner to this mission, I would highly encourage you to reach out to them directly, as well as reach out to Widelity, Ciena, and others inside your ecosystem to get better networked about the moving landscape that we have, the developing landscape that we have right now, as the rules for this unprecedented program are being rolled out and defined. We're at the stage now where many of the state's plans are public, and we're in an approval process, and we've got some time yet before dollars start passing, but the preparation's well underway everywhere, and there's a lot of folks that are eager to help you and join the mission and join that broadband journey together. So by all means, Caitlyn, there's so much detail at a local level or a state-based level even that we could go through here. Suffice to say, we've got an ecosystem and an industry of experts like Widelity that can help folks kind of parse through that complexity, and you don't necessarily feel like you have to boil the open there. Reach out for help, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, this is as the paperwork nerds of this whole ecosystem, we're compliance people. We really get into all of these 100-page initial proposals and all of that. It's actually very exciting to see the nuances between the different states. So a good way to think about this is that it's sort of a nesting doll type program. So you have the overall BEAD program that has the federal rules, and those rules have to be followed. And then inside that, you have each individual state creating their own rules that follow the federal guidelines, but then may have additional state guidelines. And those state guidelines are specifically tailored in order to meet the needs of the state, because one state might have environmental problems that another state that doesn't have, or one state might have a really great middle mile infrastructure and just need last mile. Another state might desperately need that middle mile in order to create the last mile. It's also complicated by other federal programs because they don't want to duplicate funds. And so you may have to work around a previous commitment from RDOF, Capital Projects Fund, what have you. And so each state is allowed to create these nuances in order to meet their specific needs. And each one is also working with a slightly different pot of money, and they have to figure out how to make that go as far as they can to reach as many people as they can. So there is a lot of similarities because of that sort of outer shell of federal guidelines, but then there are very state-specific nuances that are really important to understand as you tackle your application for that state. For example, some states are having a pre-qualification round, which means that they will have you, they require applicants to pre-apply before the application window opens to ensure that they are able to so essentially making sure that you have like the basic qualifications, that your financials look okay, that you have the amount of experience you need, that sort of thing. And the idea with that is that it, streamlines the application process. But if you miss that pre-qualification round, then you may not be able to apply at all. So that's something that's really important to know about beforehand, because if you're just looking at the application dates, you might miss your opportunity. And some states will only allow you to work if you're in partnership with a municipality. So if you're in partnership with a municipality, then you have to make a personal relationship with that municipality, maybe the county, maybe a city government, in order to build out in that area. And so that might be a very specific requirement for that state as well. So it's very state specific in that sense. So this slide, actually, can we go back to the previous slide just for a moment? Lovely. Okay, so real quick before we get deeper into that, I wanted to take a look at this little diagram on the right. And so light to dark, this is when their initial proposal was released. So their initial proposal draft is essentially the rough draft of how each state is planning to run the program. Once it gets approved, then they will have it finalized, and then they'll actually run the program. And then after the program has run, they will submit their final proposal to the NTIA. So what you're really looking for is the NTIA approval of the initial proposal, volume 2. That's when things will really kick off. So you can see the earliest adopters were Virginia and Louisiana, and trailing way in the back we have Alaska, Florida, Utah, Iowa, and Missouri. So you can see, so this isn't a guarantee that this is the pace that everyone's going to go at, but this is an indicator of who is more ready. So you can see Virginia and Louisiana are highly motivated to go ahead and spend this money. They're going to run their programs very quickly. They are eager to hit the ground running. And because the initial proposals are approved on a rolling basis, they're also going to be the first ones to get their initial proposals approved. And so if you really pay attention to when they were released, you'll get an idea of how fast their application window is coming up.
I'll just add before we move on, the thing that we really as an industry, again, at a very high level, we need to recognize is the fact that we have an unprecedented approach to this problem because we've given the highest authority and the final decisions to the local governments. This is excellent in many ways because at the end of the day, these are the people with very localized, specialized needs. They're the ones making the call. So therefore, their needs are most likely to be met at a very local level, or at least the capital will be intensified towards their vector. And so in many ways, I feel like that's genius. The challenge and the bet that we're making as an industry with this policy is there are new people administering this project and that are setting rules that have not been the people that have been doing most of this work for the last 10 years as we've experimented starting in 2010. So that decade's worth of experience is not necessarily held by the exact institutions that are now governing this historic investment. I just want to say that out loud because it's important for us to all recognize and be self-aware of, yes, the genius of empowerment that's occurred in the form of this local decision-making capability, but we all have to support them now because we know that there are folks rowing in new roles, and the ecosystem and the industry around us needs to support these broadband offices and the programs and people that are associated with them because there's a lot of new lift associated with redirecting the money and the decision and the programs as we have. So
yes, absolutely. That is a really important factor to think about. I will say a mitigating factor to that is the NTIA has elected representatives to work directly with the states. So they are kind of shepherding things along. So it shouldn't be too chaotic. But there is also a lot to be said for self-advocacy. If there is something that is not working, that is frustrating, that doesn't seem to be intuitive to what the state actually needs, then speaking up is extremely important. Not all of the initial proposals are still open for public comment, but a few of them are. So I would recommend checking. And if your initial proposal is still open for public comment in the area that you're interested in, read it, make those comments, because they do matter, because they are taking into account the stakeholders' opinions and experience. So you are not a passive participant in this. You can very much impact how this legislation goes. And a great example of that is actually the letter of credit. So the letter of credit is a requirement that is a very heavy lift for a lot of these smaller ISPs, because you need to have a lot of cash on hand in order to obtain that letter of credit. You also have to be working with a specific subset of banks. And so there was a lot of advocacy that was coming from the state offices and from the stakeholders to offer a waiver to that. And now there are other options that are open to people because of that advocacy. So even though we're getting late in the process and there's less opportunity to speak up now, there are still ways to get involved and to speak out and to participate. So if something feels like it should be different, then talk to your state, talk to your representatives. They are there. They are very motivated to make this work. So they will often be open to listening to what you have to say. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about those volume 2s. So when I'm talking about volume 2s, that is the volume 2 of the initial proposal. This is the most important document that's out right now as far as ISPs, because this is where the program on the state level is outlined. So we have been studying these over the past few weeks. The deadline for submitting these to the NTIA is December 27th, I believe. And so it is fast coming up. So a lot of them are out, or all of them are out now, actually. But the public comment window is closing, and then they're going to have to give it to the NTIA. But we've seen some really interesting trends. Like I said, pre-qualification phases are not universal, but there are several states that are doing them. Unsurprisingly, considering BEAD's messaging thus far, a lot of the planning is very fiber dominant. There are some states that will be prioritizing fiber to the degree that they only accept fiber for the first round of applications, and then they'll do a secondary round for alternative technology. So fiber is very much at the fore of everyone's mind. There's a lot of future proofing involved in that, and it's not going to be able to get everywhere. There's going to be areas where fixed wireless is going to be more financially feasible and potentially more environmentally feasible. And so it's not going to be 100% fiber, but fiber is very dominant. An interesting thing that we've found is that a lot of states, when they were initially talking about BEAD, they were talking about adapting existing programs and then putting BEAD money into it. And as a whole, we found that people are generally creating new programs to distribute BEAD. So they might use an existing program as a model, but they are creating a separate application system. They are setting it up as its own closed system, which I think, considering all of the federal rules that they have to apply, that's probably a good decision. But that was just kind of an interesting thing, interesting shift that we saw from early planning phases to the current planning phase. So those are things that we're seeing a lot of as far as trends. Outliers are, there are a few states that are trying to delay their funding. The main rationale for this is that they have lingering funds that are about to expire from other programs that they want to move through first. So primarily this is capital projects funds because those need to be spent by 2026. But there's a little bit of SLFRF funds and some state funds that are in play, and that is generally why people are trying to delay funding. And by delayed funding, I mean that they are not claiming 100% of their funding once the initial proposal is approved. They are waiting until the final proposal is approved to claim it. And on the ground, what that might mean is that the whole process of funding ending up in the hands of the ISPs might take a little bit longer, because they're deliberately slow rolling so that they can handle the influx of cash. So that's the rationale that they're offering. Match coverage is not that common. There are a few areas where they will cover the matching funds that you need to bring to the table. So this minimum match is 25%. Most successful applications in our experience exceed the match. So you would need to bring at least 25% match. But there are a few circumstances where state allocated funds will cover the match. Usually this is for extremely high cost areas or areas where the state is concerned that there will not be sufficient build out. And generally this will be something that's negotiated post application. But that we've only seen that in a couple of states. That's not going to be super common. So if you are making plans, you should definitely plan to bring at least 25% match. And that can be it's dependent on the state, whether it's in kind or cash match. But you can there are different ways to finance that other than having the cash on hand. You can get a bridge loan. You can work with partners who are able to bring that investment. Actually, Trey, do you want to speak to that a little bit?
No, you're right. There's a whole ecosystem of players that are involved in know the financing and the planning side of that part of the journey. And yeah, 100%. There's people we both know that we can help connect folks to make sure they got all those options and a clear pathway, visible. So 100%. These are great takeaways. If you will, take us to the next slide, Michael. So we'll just keep moving on for the interest of time here. We got about 10 more minutes and we'll wrap.
Sure.
So let's talk just real quickly about how does that network become sustainable? We talked about joint use cases before, and everything that's on the left-hand side of this picture is all the homes and the residential locations that need service. These are the unserved and underserved locations that the BEAD project will be funded to support. However, when that infrastructure is in place, that network also will be co-located with things like wireless cell sites and small cells and utility substations and community anchor institutions and on and on and on. And there's lots of other types of service, as well as neighboring telcos that are going to want wholesale transit across that infrastructure that you've built. All of those represent monetization opportunities for that networking asset. And as a shameless plug, I'll tell you the Ciena solution for serving residential homes naturally provides access and service capability out into all these different types. It's part and parcel to the way we've been monetizing optical transport networks for decades. So the way the telcos have survived in that early rural push in the 2010s and the 2000s, when they were having to find all those different monetization strategies, the networking portfolio that we have to bring to market for this last mile opportunity with BEAD native to all those other monetizations capabilities. So you've got networking expertise here and partnership inside your ecosystem among Ciena and others that can help you find clear to the business case. It's going to make you stay in the black in the long run there. All right. Any thoughts on this one, or we can move to the next, Caitlyn?
Yeah, just real quick. So that's something that you really need to look at on not only the engineering side, but the compliance side, because you need to really pay attention to what are eligible costs and what are not. And if you are creating a network and part of your sustainability narrative is offering these diversified services, but that requires specialized equipment, that equipment might not be covered by the BEAD funds or be allowed as a matching in-kind match. But it might be a necessary part of building out the network in order to achieve that sustainability. So that's something to keep in mind, both with engineering and with budgeting.
And don't let Caitlyn, don't let Caitlyn blow up your concept of it could work, because at the end of the day, while there may be some equipment that doesn't qualify for funding, 80% of the cost of this whole thing is just burying the glass itself, right, Caitlyn? And the infrastructure that's going to go in the ground is obviously going to be supported by the BEAD project, and that custom equipment or anything else that you may need. Or in the case of Ciena solution, it's the same native equipment that can go in both directions. You've got you got lots of options there, but at the end of the day, that's a very small part of the overall
Oh yeah,
project.
absolutely.
But, the capital intensity is all in that outside plant construction, isn't it?
Right, exactly. And to be clear, like, I think that the creating that sustainability and having those non-eligible costs might that might sound concerning on the surface, but that's actually really great, because you're still using a lot of federal funds to build that backbone that you are piggybacking off of, and that is that much less money of your own capital that you're having to spend, and you still end up with a sustainable network, and then you can build off of that to create these other services. So you're still getting the benefit of that federal funding. What I'm trying to get at is that you just need to do it strategically, and you need to be prepared for what will be covered and what won't be covered. So you just have to do it intelligently, which hopefully your engineers and your financial officers and compliance experts can help you figure that out.
Well, and what a great segue into this one, right? The ecosystem. So, this is a commercial for our entire industry. It's to say, again, that comment of it's going to take all of us. There's a lot of expertise inside this market. And if you're a network operator that's considering building inside of a BEAD project, you're living in the rural parts of this country where, there's staffing limitations, there's expertise limitations, and the entire market for a lot of decades now has consolidated the expertise required in order to support these networks in common places. And they exist inside technology providers like Ciena. They exist inside of consultancy firms like Widelity. They exist inside of nonprofits and other advocacy groups. There's lots of organizations, and we all know one another. And so I'm just raise my hand to say, if you're new to rural broadband and you need a map of where all these other people are and the types and segmentation of assistance that's available, it crosses banking and legal and operations and technical and business structure and compliance and every aspect of labor, etc. There's people in this industry that have figured this stuff out. You've got a really quick on-ramp onto this opportunity space with BEAD. It's moving really fast, and there's going to be a lot of people, just by nature of the way it's grassroots up, right, and local government controlled. There's going to be a lot of new players in this space that are going to be looking at broadband. And I just want to raise my hand to anyone in that audience and say, we can help you find all the friends in this industry that's been building rural broadband for the last 10, 20 years. And that's what this ecosystem is really about. It's going to be about all of us working together.
For sure. And, Widelity can really offer that on the compliance side as well. We've worked
Yeah.
closely with government agencies. We have these connections. We're able to talk to people. We will call up your state broadband office and ask them all the questions you need to know. We have this intimate knowledge of how these reimbursement programs work and what kind of hoops you have to jump through in order to make this work, because there is a lot of things you need to do in order to get the funding. But but it's not impossible, and it's extremely helpful to have someone who's been through that before and can help you get on the right track. So we're here to help. Okay, so real quick, we are running out of time, so we're gonna go through this real quick. And these slides will also go up with our follow-up email. So you'll be able to review these in your own time. But just a quick overview, what to do now: get your financial strategy in order. If you do not have a plan for where your money's coming from, where you're planning to build yet, you need to have it now or very, very soon, because these programs are happening. You're going to blink and they're going to be here. They're very quickly happening. And on that same note, make sure that you have good partnerships. Make sure that your manufacturers are BABA compliant. That's something we didn't get into as much as I would have liked, but that's something that Ciena has a new partnership that can really help you with that. That domestic manufacturing is really important. You need to be able to have a supply chain that's both secure and dependable. You need to be able to make these connections now, because 3 months from now, all of this has to be ready. So I would urge you to if you have not gotten going yet, get going, because this is happening now.
Yep. And the only thing I'll add there is, don't assume you understand the market if your perspective is a year plus old, right? In terms of those partnership capabilities, in the last 12 months, I've personally experienced more disruptive new business models, new partnership types. The amount of 3P novel framework that I've seen in the last 12 months is more than I'd seen in the last decade. There are a lot of entrants chasing this money, but there's a lot of new opportunities and configurations to build a business around. And so, that partnership, the role that you can play and the role that you can expect people around you in the ecosystem can play is shifting. People are growing, right? The force of this demand is transforming, the business models are all around us. So just don't take it for granted. Don't assume it's all the same. Check in, do some networking and take some free advice from folks that are native that can help kind of guide your way through it. All right.
All right, I think we're going to go a little over time, if that's okay.
I think we have time for just a couple questions before we wrap it up. I'm going to read one that we got sent in. I think this is for you, Trey. So we're an ISP, and if we're building a network for residential broadband, what else is required to make it work for diversified broadband?
Well, when you say the term diversified broadband, I'm going to assume that means serving things other than residential customers. And if I got that question right,
yes,
then I'd tell you that the short and easy answer is if you're building with traditional technology, there's an overlay network required. Some of that equipment may have innate capabilities within certain brands to do Ethernet business services. Your core BGP router may be able to do layer 3 services all the way out to the edge, but you're talking about new CPE product at that point, may or may not have the aggregation required. But in other cases, with new designs, if you're not talking about a legacy network, I would tell you today's model looks very different in that the aggregation network and the transport layer, the middle mile, of any of these networks has universal access capabilities and is natively capable of doing everything from X-Haul to layer 2, layer 3 services, residential, wholesale transit, more northbound capacity, et cetera. So the way we're building these networks today and in the future looks a lot more simplified, and a lot of that network functionality has condensed some of the layers and both the aggregation and the OSI stack, and both the layers in both directions have consolidated. So let's come talk about it. I'd love to share more insight into that, but I'd tell you the easy answer is if you're building new, it's possible to build it on one platform, and that's exciting too, because I think that's what the scenario in so many of these rural networks is going to require, right? Some cost efficient solutions. So we've got those, and love to talk more about it.
Yes, absolutely. I know we are short on time. We've run a bit long here. We do appreciate everybody joining us for this webinar. Here on these slides here is our respective contact information, both Ciena and Widelity. Please reach out if you have any questions, something comes to mind along the way. Also want to highlight as well that these slides, some additional information and a recording and a link to the recording of this webinar will be forthcoming. Any concluding remarks, Trey and Caitlyn?
Well, on behalf of Ciena, I just want to thank Widelity for your partnership, for your role, shoulder to shoulder, standing with us, with our clients, taking folks through this broadband journey. As an industry, we got a lot of work ahead, right? And it's moving fast, and there's a lot going on there. But I've reflected many times over the past year or so just exactly how fortunate we all are to be in such a significant build cycle that is so mission oriented, whether it be the BABA insourcing of domestic supply chain and jobs, or whether it's just connecting the unconnected and finally taking this network that we've been building for our entire careers and offering it to everyone ubiquitously as a utility. There's a lot to feel really good about here across the industry. And I thank you for your partnership. You're invaluable in the role that you play. And we certainly appreciate the partnership here. So thanks for the time.
Thank you. Yeah, we are very excited. Thank you for having this conversation with us. This was very exciting. And I completely agree. This is a wonderful opportunity, not only for business growth, but also for reaching our fellow Americans and getting them connected and giving them socioeconomic opportunities that they did not have before, and creating this environment where everyone is connected and where we can really, realize the dream of broadband being for everyone. And being a part of that and being a part of that build out is really exciting and fulfilling. So I'm excited for the year ahead. I know I've been preaching this all year, but just make sure that you get ready now. So don't wait, get ready now. That's my last message. But thank you so much for joining us.
Awesome,
it sure
guys.
is. All right, thank you so much.
All right, bye now.